So picture this. It's early August 2024, and something weird starts happening in the global markets. The Japanese yen, a currency that had been getting weaker and weaker for months, just suddenly, out of nowhere, surges. And this sends a shockwave everywhere. Stock prices from Tokyo all the way to New York start to buckle, and traders are just scrambling. It really felt like a ghost in the machine, you know? A sudden jolt that had no obvious cause. So what was this invisible hand that could shake the market so violently? Well, to understand that, we have to look at a strategy that's often compared to a hidden force of nature in finance. People have called this force financial dark matter. You can't see it, but its gravitational pull on global assets is absolutely immense. And what we saw back in August, that was a tremor, a crack in that invisible force. Okay, so let's give this financial dark matter a name. The culprit here is one of the most powerful, yet honestly little understood engines in the entire global economy, the Japanese yen carry trade. So what exactly is it? At its core, it's a beautifully simple idea. You borrow money where it's incredibly cheap, and for decades that's been Japan. And then you take that money and invest it somewhere you can get a much, much better return. The profit you make is in that difference, or what traders call the carry. Right, but why is money so cheap in Japan in the first place? This timeline really tells the whole story. After Japan's massive bubble economy imploded back in 1990, the Bank of Japan, the BOJ, spent decades just trying to fight off recession. And their main weapon? Slashing interest rates. They kept cutting and cutting until rates hit zero in 1999, and then they even went negative in 2016. This basically made the yen free to borrow. And the scale of this whole thing is just staggering. With almost no way to make money at home, a literal flood of cash poured out of Japan. By early 2024, Japanese investors were holding 667 trillion yen. That's over $4.5 trillion US dollars in foreign assets. This massive outflow of money created the absolute perfect conditions for the carry trade to thrive. So, how does this simple trade turn into what is basically a global money printing machine? Well, the mechanics are surprisingly straightforward. Let's just walk through it. Step 1. A big hedge fund or trader borrows a huge amount of yen at a rate that's next to nothing. Let's say 0.5%. Step 2. They immediately swap those yen for a currency like the US or Australian dollar. Step 3. They use those dollars to buy an asset, like a safe government bond that pays a much higher interest rate. And finally, step 4, they just sit back and pocket the difference. And this right here shows you exactly why it's so tempting. I mean, if you can borrow money at 0.5% and safely invest it at 5.5%, you've literally created a 5% profit margin out of thin air. Now multiply that by billions of dollars, often using leverage to make the bet even bigger, and you can see why this trade became irresistible. But for all its appeal, this trade has a much darker, much more dangerous reputation among seasoned traders, and for a very, very good reason. And this famous Wall Street saying captures it perfectly. You spend your time making these small, steady profits. That's the pennies. But you are completely exposed to a sudden, catastrophic event. That's the steamroller, that can wipe out all of your gains and then some in an instant. And that steamroller is currency risk. Let's look at the Australian dollar. For years, investors borrowed yen to buy high-yielding Aussie assets. It felt like a one-way bet that couldn't lose. Until the 2008 financial crisis hit, the Aussie dollar absolutely plunged against the yen, and years of those carefully collected pennies were just vaporized, almost overnight. The steamroller had arrived.
Or think about the so-called Mrs. Watanabe. This is a nickname for Japan's army of retail investors. In the 2010s, they were lured in by Turkey's incredibly high interest rates and poured their money into Turkish lira bonds. But when the lira collapsed in 2018, they were completely trapped and their life savings were just decimated.
And it's not just big-time traders. In parts of Eastern Europe, regular people took out mortgages denominated in Japanese yen because the interest rates were lower. It seemed like a really smart move, until the yen got stronger. All of a sudden, the amount of debt they owed in their own local currency exploded. A cheap loan had suddenly become a crippling burden.
So you see, these individual trades, they all add up to become this massive systemic force, a river of cheap yen that acts as a hidden fuel for markets and bubbles all over the world. Just look at this chart.
During the 2008 crisis, as fear took over, investors fled all their risky assets. And they all rushed to do the same thing, buy back yen to close out their carry trades. This mad dash caused the yen to surge by over 30% against the dollar, strengthening from 125 all the way down to 87. The stampede for the exits was violent and it was fast. So here's the really crucial point. The carry trade didn't start the 2008 fire, but when it unwound, it acted like gasoline poured on top of it. It amplified the crash, it made the volatility way worse, and it added this immense downward pressure on everything as everyone ran for cover at the same time. Okay, now let's fast forward to 2022. You had the US Federal Reserve hiking interest rates like crazy to fight inflation, but the Bank of Japan was still stuck near zero. This created one of the biggest interest rate gaps in modern history, and the yen carry trade grew to what some traders called gargantuan proportions, quietly propping up asset prices all over the globe. Which brings us right back to today. After decades of being the world's cheap ATM, signs are starting to pop up that this party might finally be coming to an end. And that's exactly what happened in August 2024. The Bank of Japan made a tiny adjustment to its policy. It was barely a nudge, but it was enough to spook all those traders who had grown comfortable and complacent, and it triggered that sudden, sharp unwind we started this whole conversation with. It was a warning shot. So what happens next? Well, there are basically two ways this can go. We could see an orderly retreat, where the Bank of Japan moves very slowly and carefully, giving everyone time to adjust. Or we could get a sudden stampede, where a surprise move or some other global shock triggers a mad rush for the exits, a lot like what we saw back in 2008. And these are the big risks you gotta watch. A full policy reversal from the BOJ, that's the big one, the one that ends the cheap money. But a new global crisis could do it too, causing investors to flee to the yen as a safe haven, which would absolutely crush the carry trade. And why this matters so much is that the stability of many global markets has been quietly leaning on this trade for support for a long, long time. Which leaves us with this final critical question. This financial dark matter has been providing a hidden gravitational pull, holding asset prices up for years. We just got a small taste of what happens when it trembles. So what happens if it disappears altogether?